Hey, everybody, we are live again for another Surviving Quarantine by Spreading Life. And I am with one of my dear friends and amazing human beings that I know, Miss Sandy Anderson. I just want to thank you so much for joining me today for this talk as we are, like I said, continuing this series on surviving quarantine by spreading life. Before we get started, I do want to encourage people, as always, to please like, subscribe, and share as we are continuing to bring positivity to your news feed during this time. And what we will be specifically talking on today is how to tend to the table. That is something that you talk a lot about, Sandy. So before we get into this, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, you know what, we've known each other. Has it been a couple of years? It was like way back where we met at a conference, and it was just such a neat connection there. And I knew there was something special in terms of our work and how it could connect. So I am a consultant and coach. I'm physically located in Minnesota. Have clients from all around. My work is primarily with organizations who are really curious about strengthening areas of recruitment, retention, and team engagement. So we really focus in on culture, workplace culture. And through that, I do retreats, workshops, webinars, coaching, and do speaking. And so I have an opportunity to be able to hopefully help people begin to explore how they can grow, protect, and represent a culture of good in their organizations.
I love that. And that's so true. If people get to hear more of you, they will instantly see your heart. And that's the thing that I love is you have such a heart for people. And so with that, I want to talk about tend to the table or tending to the table as you speak on. How did you even come up with that? And what does that even mean?
So it would be 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. And at that time, we had thought that the cancer had metastasized to my liver, which was going to be a total game changer in terms of outcomes. And this metaphor really surfaced where I thought of myself and 7 girlfriends walking down the street and me being invited into a cafe to sit at a table. Okay. And so I come and sit at that table, and all of a sudden breast cancer is put on that table, and I have to determine, is my table resilient enough to do this? How am I going to do this hard work? And part of that comes out of the stats that 1 out of every 8 women is going to deal with breast cancer in her lifetime. So I was that one. And so I, at that table began to start to think about how do we build resilient tables to do hard things at, whether it is breast cancer, whether it's a pandemic, whether it is some type of other loss that we've had. And so from that, really, and my passion around organizations and working with organizations for years, it was just this natural flow to be able to say, how do we build resilient teams? How do we build resilient cultures in our workplaces and in our families and faith communities and communities in general, so that we can face hard things and come out on the other side stronger.
And I think that's so beautiful right now too, because yours was could be seen as a crushing blow. Like, how do you sustain that weight? Where right now, and I've used this analogy probably 1,000 times in these live streams, it's like we're all in different storms, but some are in yachts and some are in kayaks. And it's the strength of the boat or the strength, but yours is in essence is the strength of the table that you have and being able to hold that up. So relating that back to right now, some people that are on weaker foundations, what are some strategies and tips that people can do to strengthen their table?
So I think one of the things that we need to do is be able to stop and get a little perspective here, because I am one of my strengths is connectedness and arranger. And so I tend to create frameworks to be able to work from things. And so whether it's a challenge like it was with breast cancer, or whether it's a challenge like a virus and how this is disrupting work, I think of it in 3 phases. There's the before, how we lived, how we worked before. Then there's the middle, how we're living and working now. And then there's the other side, how we'll transition. And that's not going to be a cut and dry thing, right? There's going to be a transition to that. And so oftentimes what happens is the middle is where it gets kind of messy.
Mm-hmm.
The middle is where we get to decide, how we're going to show up here, because what we do in the middle, as I say, what we do in the middle matters for the other side. So I just want to give a little bit of framework to this. This would be an example of marriage. Okay, so grateful that my husband and I, though not perfect, right, but worked for 34 years at our marriage. So when cancer came, and our before had been, we had been investing in our marriage. So when the middle came, when that challenge came, we weren't dealing with the pettiness that oftentimes can come, in marriages when we haven't been tending to that table. Mm-hmm. Okay. We were able to kind of do this hard work and focus collectively on the cancer, the care of our children, even though they were adult children and grandchildren, all of those things. But we did that with the mindset of what do we want the other side to look like, mm-hmm. even when we aren't sure what it's going to look like. And so when we think about tables and how we tend to them, how we strengthen them, it really starts becoming to look at asking some questions about before. Mm-hmm. What worked well prior to this? What are resources that we have that we can carry over, into the present middle? And then what's working now so that we can start thinking about that other side, and where are we seeing these beautiful and amazing things that are happening in organizations to go, oh my word, we would have never tried that before. Mm-hmm. We were forced to, or what I call an external opportunity came along. Mm-hmm. Now we know that works, and we can carry that over to the other side.
I love that. And how much I just love speaking to you, because I think we just, our hearts connect every time. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I hear from this, or actually I hear multiple things, but it is a preventative approach in essence, even though it is, whenever you hear the word cancer or you hear the word pandemic, you feel very reactive of it. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that you've created space in the beginning so that you can deal with the middle. Mm-hmm. And so the question I have for you next is, and I was posed this question the other day on a live stream, and it was, what do you want to stick after this? Mm-hmm. And so figuring that out, how can people, well, other than answering it themselves, what are some things that people can do to be aware of what they want to stick and then make it stick?
Mm-hmm. So I think curious questions become really important. Mm-hmm. And the folks, I will tell you, the organizations that I've worked with that, that had did some culture work prior to, and in the before asked some of these questions, like, what do we want our cultures to look and feel like? How do we want them to function? And they started being intentional with that. Mm-hmm. I am watching them in the middle, just like, wow, like it just is exciting, because they created a table. They created space where people could start being transparent, share ideas, and really come up with solutions that are going to put them in a better position on the other side. Okay. Mm-hmm. Those that did not tend to their tables before, mm-hmm. we really see them struggling now, because if it was hard to show up for work, or it was hard to be motivated to work for, let's say, a leader who was, for lack of a better word, unsupportive, toxic, whatever, depleting, how much more now, right? Mm-hmm. So there is some lessons in this as to, even if you haven't started doing this work, you can start asking some questions. And one of the questions that I would say right now to be asking in terms of businesses is, what are some of the unexpected or unique discoveries that are happening in the middle right now? Being able to actually name them out, and then start to think which one of those makes sense to bring to the other side. The other thing is, what policies, what processes, what programs are either thriving and showing to be really relevant, even in the middle. Mm-hmm. Wow, we really want to build on those things, right? Mm-hmm. And which ones aren't showing to be very relevant, and then asking yourself that kind of tough question: was it relevant before? Mm-hmm. Or were we just doing it because that's what we always did? So I really think that, that's one thing I love to do, is to be able to guide those conversations worth having, those curious conversations where we can ask these questions in a safe place, that give us the potential to show up in a really intentional way on the other side, but also right now in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this can be applied for families too, in marriages.
Yes, I was
Because
about to say that.
because we can be asking ourselves, like, what are discoveries and things that we really like, that are happening here in the middle that we want to carry over, but also what are some vulnerabilities and gaps that are showing up. And I would say that, if I was a young mom right now with kids at home, I would, and I've always said kids are this amazing thing that God uses to refine us in ways that nothing else could, right?
Amen.
Yeah, they show this beautiful side of us, but they also just surface this part that you go, oh my word, I didn't even know that existed. But I think that's that part where we get to go, okay, there's a vulnerability there. There's a gap there. And it's always grace, grace over guilt, right? But being able to ask those questions set us up for something that's, I think, exciting on the other side.
I love that you just said grace over guilt. I've actually never heard that. And so, well, before I get into that, I see that Mike is on. If anybody's on, please let us know who's watching and listening. Thank you, Mike, as always. Again, this is somebody, Mike, I always talk about is there's people that you say in the South, I'm in the South, that there's people that you say, bless their heart. And that means you're about to say the worst things ever. And there's people that I say, thank God for that blessing. And I always say Mike is one of those that's a thank God for that blessing because his heart and his care. But I think that's another thing is that even him in his aspect, he is always with grace and never gives you a guilt trip on things. So one, who's around your table? Let's talk about that. And I think it's big about, for me, for in essence, my table, I'm thinking about not only home, but also work. At worksby, like everything we say, we want to stay hot, and that's humble, open, and transparent. And that is a space to give that grace instead of the overwhelming guilt that I feel like we already have. So what are some things that people can do to, one, who do they need to surround themselves with? And then how can they be able to create the grace mentality for sustainability?
So I would say, in terms of surrounding yourself by people, one of my work, and I have quite a bit of experience in working with a theory called appreciative inquiry. Okay. Appreciative inquiry was developed from David Cooper-Ryder several years ago, and it's very in sync with positivity, like in terms of positive psychology. And the idea is that whatever we focus in on, we're going to get more of. And where we put our energy is what we're going to get more of. And so if we tend to naturally in organizations, we name a problem, we talk about the problem, we talk about who the problem is, how the problem's impacting us, what the problem, is doing to the company, all of the things. The problem is the star. And one of the things Cooper-Ryder said was, we don't ignore the problems, we just look at them from the other side. So I surround myself with people who are thinking that way, who will name a problem, because we need to name the problem. That's because part of an issue is when an organization is unwilling, or even in a family or in a marriage is unwilling. If folks are unwilling to name, there's a problem. But do it with grace again. But also do it with the idea of, we're not going to finger point. We're going to actually think, we're going to name the problem, and then we're going to look at it from the other side. Because then we start saying, here's the problem. How do we get to the other side? What are action steps? So I surround myself by people who are like-minded in that. And it can be in my professional life, my personal life, and I had my tribe of women that really walked through breast cancer with me. And those were women who were going to speak honestly and lovingly to me, but that I also could be honest and in the middle of the mess with as well. And this is really important, I think, even in my marriage. I mean, having somebody at my table who can speak truth to me and honestly say, hey, you know what, you need to just take a step back or take a breath. But also who's going to challenge me to be saying, hey, what can we do with this? How can we move this towards solutions? So I think it's very important to surround yourself with people like that, but also to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we're going to walk into tables and organizations and they have been so honestly just like depleted and beat up that, when you start talking about solutions, I can tell you, I've been called Pollyanna before. I'm like, I'll take it. Okay. But I'm one who will say, no, we're going to name the problem and this is uncomfortable, but we're not going to point fingers. We're going to then how do we move from that? So I think that is grace in action, because we are not showing grace. We are not showing love and compassion in the workplace or in our families when we avoid speaking to what the problem is.
I agree to that. And that's something that we talk about, is that for us, that love is very important, not just at home, but also at work.
Absolutely.
Because love is actually oxytocin, which is trust. And for me, what I have found through research is that it actually kind of lines back up to that love is patient, kind, honest, and understanding, and does not boast of ill will. And that's how we create that. It's that grace. But it's also in the other aspect of honest conversations and leaning into the suck, because sometimes those suck and they're uncomfortable. But the transformation that comes from it, because if you're walking around in la la land, you're going to stay in la la land until something hits you.
Yeah.
And then the structure of the table is going to collapse in essence.
Right. Right. And I think what's important, Emily, is that we actually, like for me, giving tools to be able to have those crucial conversations. So I have a tool, they're on my website under table resources. And in fact, I don't know if I have this one up there, but I can get it up there. But, it's crucial conversations. Like, how do you have a crucial conversation? Like, what does that look like? So I talk about how you name it, you reframe it, and then you tame it. And so there's this process to it. But then also, how do you give feedback? And I'm not talking about, critical feedback, but just, both good, the constructive feedback as well as the positive feedback. Those are not things that we learned in high school. Those are not things that we learned in college. And, one of the things I go back to when I'm working with organizations is yours and my first organization were our families that we were born into. So you and I learned at a very early age, did we have a voice? Did our opinion matter? I loved watching your dad's, interview with you, Emily, because I could tell that your parents created a space where your opinions mattered, where your voice mattered, where you could put out thoughts and that they could be, that they would be, helped process those types of things. That then impacted how you went into kindergarten and how you went into elementary and high school, how confident that you felt in different spaces. Okay. So in the workplace, some of what we are dealing with is people that have experienced trauma at the table. And I mean that quite 100%. Sincerely. Yeah, I mean it quite sincerely, that they have experienced trauma at the table, whether it's in their family of origin, their current family, or even a previous workplace. And so I love this book by Margaret Wheatley and Deb Frisé. It's called Walk Out, Walk On. And they talk about communities, and really communities that were struggling, and how did they shift in that. And one of the things that they looked at was a commonality was there were particular roles that showed up, and I would say show up at the table. Okay. There was the pathfinder. There was the one who looked at the problem and went, holy cow, I don't know what we're going to do about this, but we'll figure something out. There's the edge walker, who was the one at the table that goes, hey, this is a crazy idea, but what if we try it, And then there's the pioneer who says, okay, that path has been, formed, but we've got to look beyond that. And so they're the ones that are out foraging. And, being from Minnesota and having, our friends from Wisconsin right across the Mississippi River, I always say, oh my word, if I would have been a pioneer coming up to the Mississippi River over in La Crosse and seeing the hills beyond the Mississippi into Minnesota, I probably would have just sat down under my wagon and sucked my thumb and cried. But we need those people who are going to pioneer and to create those places. But then Wheatley talks about how we also need the kind hospice workers at the table, the ones who, when people have been traumatized at a table, or the person whose program is getting sliced, to be able to have that compassion for them. And then I add one last one, because we need settlers. We need, those pioneers, say, hey, here, this might be a good place for a little town. But we need the settlers who are going to stay, and they're going to create those churches and schools and mercantile, those types of things. They're the ones who are going to keep those programs going. So again, that goes back to who we need at our table. We need a multiple set of roles to be able to help us face those tough things.
I love that. And if you ever get an email from me, it says the kiss of death is to be the genius with 10,000 helpers, instead be the genius with 10,000 geniuses. And I love that basically you're putting a group of geniuses together, but you're also allowing it for sustainability, which is huge. That we've seen a lot of times that people come into roles and they'll do a training or 2 or 3 or 4, and then it's like, meh, it's kind of dead and gone. So the sustainability at work, home, and play, because it's not going to happen in one training. It's not going to happen in one day. It's not going to happen in one setting. That this is lifestyle and behavioral things. So I do want to pop up a few comments right now. Thank you so much, Jeremy. He says, great stuff, ladies. Love this combo. Mike said, is your hand outstretched to help, or is it pointing to someone, some problem? Which is so true. It's how are you doing it? How's your hands? Love y'all and what y'all are doing. Thank you. And then Corey also says that she's here. Welcome, Corey. Hello. It's so great to have such an amazing community around, to be able to interact and speak with and give this positivity back to. But it's not rose-colored glasses, though, because that's what a lot of people, positive psychology. I had somebody or actually today on a podcast I was doing, they're like, well, for leaders, and I believe that you can be a leader at home or work, it's whoever you serve and are in service to. So also your family counts in this, or anybody that you encounter as a leader. What he was saying is, this kind of sounds like chocolate covered broccoli at times. And so it is something good for you that's covered up with something just to make it palatable. So how is this different for people? And I know how, but how would you explain it? Because I've seen it in action.
Yeah. So that's why, clients that I work with, they will chronically hear. And if you go to my website, it's the first quote that's right up there. It says, how we live impacts how we lead. Okay. We can't separate the two. Bob Chapman talked about, in one of his books, talked about how you lead impacts how other people live. Okay. So, a little bit of that flip is that how I show up for my family, how I show up for myself personally, like how I took care of myself even last night, trying to get to bed, all impacts how I show up for my clients today. Right. So it is not just, you get the Sandy, here today that, maybe has, her pandemic hairdo looking okay. Right. But then you get a different Sandy tomorrow. No, it's the same. Okay. So I think, and another piece to this is, there have been so many programs out there that people have tried to sell over the years on how to shift culture, on how to do this. And, it really, what it takes is a heart shift from the leaders. Okay. The heart shift that says, how I live impacts how I lead these people. So if I'm not tending to, and we're going to be really frank here, and I am sometimes to my clients, if I'm not tending to an addiction over here, whatever it might be, it is impacting how I lead over here. So to think that it doesn't, that I can have this separate personal life that doesn't impact how I lead, that's just not true. Okay. And so in order to really, I think, be authentic and transparent, in whether it's building your culture at home or at work, is that we have to first be looking, when we talked about like, where are you pointing your hand? It's like right here. It's like, I got to be asking myself, am I drinking enough water? Am I getting, am I walking or doing Pilates? Am I, all of those different things. So I think that makes a huge shift to it. And then one other thought is that, what you and I are talking about is adaptive work. What you and I, we are not talking about technical work that you can check the boxes. This is adaptable, and it's very fluid because we're dealing with people, right? And we ourselves are people. The other thing I would say is it's paradigm shift. So it's that, it's really owning and saying that this is a shift in not how I'm going to show up at every meeting, how I'm going to show up in the hallway when I interact with people, the texts, the whole thing, right? It's a whole person shift. And one of the things I will say to to leaders is that we have the team, and that's all the relationship stuff, the adaptive stuff, and we have the tasks. That's the technical stuff. All right. It's always team over task. Always team over task. Task is important. We need that to happen. But if we're tending to the team, I will tell you what, you are going to have to not worry about the task.
That's so true, because again, you heard my father's talk. That's something that I was taught a lot, is that people first. It's the people first, profits later, or how you treat your people be reflective in your bank account aspect of it. And I think that's so true, is that, and that's what he said, even on that, if you care for your people, they're going to outwork you. Like, they're going to bust their butt because they care and they have compassion. And so I think that's the important thing. And the other thing I want to talk about this is that paradigm shift. It is not about perfection. So I feel like some people are hearing this is like, oh God, this is so much work. I'm going to be this perfect person. It is not. We struggle. We talk about our struggles. This morning, I struggle with the thought that I'm a failure. Like, I struggle with that. That plays in my brain, and I have to tell it and claim it that it's not. I have to turn it on the reverse. That is something that constantly I battle with. There are things that we are going to come and we are going to be real, and it didn't happen in a day. And we're still fighting things that happen in the pre-shift. They can come up in the middle, these thoughts and these, but it's all about, in that space, do you claim it, and do you take it in, and do you accept it? And so I do say that Mike did say, thank you. Sometimes I forget me. And I think that is so true. So what,
Emily, I just want to share that for me, in being transparent, that, one, I have to know my why, and my why never changes. So at the end of the day, and I have my why posted right over there. It's like, I always have it up in front of me. So I need to know, because that's a huge part of what I call my relevancy filter. It helps me figure out what I do and what I don't do. Okay. But personally, I lean into the fact that, certainly my faith is a part of that. I can't separate myself out of that. And so when we talk about it being hard and not easy work, it isn't. Okay. It is hard. So this is where I say to myself, Sandy, it's not about your grit. It's about his glory. And it's not about your hustle. It's about his holy. And for me, when I focus on glory and holy versus grit and hustle, that helps me to get a little bit more balanced in the fact that we're doing hard work. We have hard stuff put on our table every day. I can't, by my own grit and hustle, keep my table strong.
I love that. And that's a great way, I'll say, that we can end on this, because that's something I needed to hear. And I love talking to you every time, Sandy. You're such a blessing. You're such a gift. So for the people that are watching, how can they reach out to you or learn more about you, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they can certainly reach out to my website, connect that way. It's sandyandersonconsulting.com. And through that, you can then, of course, reach through email, phone, all of that information is on there. That's probably the best way to do that. And then also I'm experimenting. I'm, like we talked about, when we're in the middle, this is a time where we have to start, being creative. And one of those is that I've started to create a YouTube channel, 10 to the table. And, it's this organic start, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm just creating small videos that teams can use during their meetings, or just even for self-reflection, to be able to say, okay, I can do the next right thing. I'm going to be faithful in the little things, and I'm just going to be relentlessly kind, and then go forward with that.
I love it. I love relentlessly kind too.
Yeah,
so good. We could talk on so many other subjects, and I could talk to you all day on this stuff. But I do want to thank everybody that tuned in to watching. I appreciate you as always. Please tune in again tomorrow, as we will be continuing the series on surviving quarantine by spreading life. And I am just grateful to be able to connect and have been able to connect with such amazing people like yourself, Sandy. So
Well,
thank you all again. And I hope you have an awesome and blessed day.